The first thing I want to say is if yesterday's reels were confusing to you and you did not follow all 40 minutes of that, that's okay. I didn't follow all 40 minutes of it either. It was what I found as I found it. A combination of wanting to liberate as much information as humanly possible as fast as I can, God forbid. And also, I have ADHD, and the dopamine in this entire process is posting and hearing back. I don't like sitting on information for a week. It's a real struggle. There were a number of overlapping and interlinking topics, and I covered over a century in those two videos, and I do intend to slow down and start making explainers, visual, follow along so that you'll fully understand it without the masters in propaganda. My master's was essentially in propaganda. It was called communications, but you do need to have studied some of that material for that video yesterday to have gone. You don't need to have done comms, but you need to have at least read Naomi Klein. I'm going to start making the explainer videos today, the educational material, but I wanted to read out one more thing because I thought it was interesting. So if you are part of the small subsect of people who actually followed that whole rant yesterday, well done. You have perfect attention spans. You are going to live a long, healthy life without dementia. The topics being investigated this week, explained, interrogated, revisited. I'm sitting here with the annual report for the Rockefeller Foundation from 1936 open in front of me. Rockefeller, big part of this. The London School of Economics, where Rockefeller bought all the chairs, and many other things, including staff appointments. The Fabians, who originally set up the London School of Economics, and where that money came from and why. Why was George Bernard Shaw and the rest of the writers collective, known as the Fabians, building an economics school? Why? Was funded by Rockefeller Foundation money. Maybe that's why. But those two are not linked directly. I have not found an evidential direct link between the Fabians and the Rockefeller, but I think that's very much designed so that somebody could say, well, technically Rockefeller did not fund the establishment of the London School of Economics. No, he just bought all the chairs. Anyway, so on the Fabians, firstly, the important question here is, why did an artistic or political society found an economics school? Because that's a weird leap already. The Fabian Society received a bequest. Its leading members used the money to establish LSE. When Henry Hunt Hutchinson, a Derby solicitor and Fabian Society member, died, his will placed his estate under 5 trustees led by Sidney Webb, with the explicit goal that the money was earmarked for Fabian propaganda, what they referred to as socialism, and related projects. The school was set up to train people under what they referred to as social sciences, and that included economists, administrators, civil servants and political leaders. This turned a political program into a recognised field of expertise. The sequence is simple. So private political group, private money, into permanent university, training administrators that will then hold government power. LSE gave the Fabian worldview, credentials, staff, archives, departments and continuity. Their founders eventually died. The institution continued producing people authorised to manage other people. Hayek and the Chicago economists were then able to use that same... I say Hayek, no, Rockefeller was able to then leverage that established institutional machinery and use LSE to build position, authority and network. Hayek then built the Mont Pelerin Society around the same principles, and Anthony Fisher then copied that method through the IEA and Atlas. The method has remained consistent since before the Fabians. Fund the institution and train the expert, and then you control the permitted explanations of the world. And that supplies the government your neoliberal personnel. Readers often defend the Fabians by listing useful public services. A hospital can save lives. That does not make every belief held by the people who supported building that public hospital legitimate. A public service does not erase imperialism, especially not when the public service is deliberately designed to fail. A welfare program does not erase eugenics. Municipal ownership does not give the population control when unelected administrators retain the decisions. If you look at the writing of George Bernard Shaw, he writes a lot about eugenics, state management and imperialism. George Bernard Shaw said every Fabian was necessarily an imperialist, and he meant it. The Fabians wanted experts to manage land, industry, public money and human populations, so they founded a university to train exactly those experts, and they call this scientific government. The people being governed did not design this system. They were not even viewed by the system as human. They were classified as material being managed. This is ongoing. The Fabians did not remove the machinery of empire. They trained a professional class to operate it under the language of public welfare, scientific management and progress. In plain terms, they used the creativity of an Irish writer to get really, really fucking good at lying. And I got that from a machine, and I replied to this machine and I said, I think it's actually worse than this. Can you help me explain how municipality, bureaucracy, technocratic waste is actually worse than raw colonial extraction? Because a billionaire extracts from you and buys a yacht, but the technocrat extracts from you and spends €3 million on a bike shed. And being a sycophant, the robot said, yes, that is the missing bridge. The billionaire extracts from workers, customers and tenants and buys a yacht. The technocrat extracts through tax, borrowing and public charges, and then commissions expensive, wasteful public projects. The bike shed only costs $3 million because the money passes through so many consultants, procurement teams, approved contractors, compliance firms, project managers and subcontractors, because all of these politicians are so afraid of just carrying risk. They don't want to get blamed for anything. They think it's better to give all the money to KPMG or PwC, and then they can point at the consultants if something goes wrong. To them, the amount of money that they are actually spending on this risk transfer process, that's not seen as something going disastrously wrong. That's seen as good management under a Fabian worldview. The official does not need to steal the money personally. The official controls where it goes. So they don't think they're stealing from you. They don't think that this kind of insane bloat and waste of taxpayer money is stealing or illicit at all. They think that they are the only people competent enough to manage all of this money, and that because they can see where it's going, that means it's safe. Never questioning why it needed to go to half these places in the first place. Every single time the public pays and a protected network of crony developers receive big fat contracts, and everyone involved records the transaction as a public service. That is the Fabian move. It makes private extraction for profit look like bureaucratic administration. The billionaire says, I own the asset, so I receive the money. The technocrat says, I think I understand the system, so I am the only person responsible enough to decide how this money gets spent. Both of these claims remove control from the person who paid the fucking money. The waste is not a mistake. These projects, like the bike shed, are what keep an entire professional chain alive, housed, fed. This is how they make their fucking money. Don't chip in and help us farm or anything. You'll have 9 consultants on 6-figure salaries writing a business case together for over a week. Then you'll have to get all the surveyors out to assess the land. Make sure it's up to the codes that we wrote so that we could send assessors to check our codes. All the lawyers then needed to review all of the contracts, make sure they're in line with the laws that we wrote so that we could afford them. Do you see where this is going? Then a whole team of procurement officers will run a big fat tender and approve supplier bids, and project managers will be brought in to oversee all of that construction. Then auditors will come in and he'll have to confirm was the process even followed correctly. Then communication staff will have to be hired to announce the big investment and make sure it's framed carefully and that you don't start to question anything. And after maybe, if you're lucky, 5 years and 3 million, you get a bike shed. Usually made of fucking concrete. And the system measures whether each procedure, which happens individually, happened at all, avoiding the obvious question of why did this cost so much? Why do you need all these people, and why are these people not speaking to each other? Narcissism, usually. Why would a lawyer talk to a consultant? Why would a consultant talk to an engineer? An engineer isn't going to understand this auditor. What's the point? And the only person in the middle of all of this who's supposed to have the competency to understand what all of these silos are doing was hired in a popularity contest paid for by the same billionaires, and is only in that job for 4 years, and is more concerned about making sure that they line something up for when they finish after 4 years than they are at all about what the country will be like when they're finished. They care more about getting some contracts into the hands of some suppliers so that some supplier might offer them a job when they finish in government. That is what the motivator, the drive is on the individual politician level. They don't care. They are not structurally incentivized to care. Party politics reinforces this. Changing government every 4 years is actually really not a great idea. Deciding that the entire ideology of a nation will flip on a whim depending on how that popularity contest goes every 4 years, and that all of these millions of minions trying to support this bureaucracy have to just fall in line with the new fascist. The only piece of continuity throughout the entire system is the fact that these people were trained to mask extraction. That the textbooks and the schools and the universities and the economics conferences and all of this legitimacy was funded illicitly and is designed to just mask extraction. The government decides how much money to collect from the public. The administrators decide what the public needs, ignoring the public most of the time. Consultants then convert that decision into a plan. Private companies receive contracts. Banks finance projects, and governments borrow. They don't even fund their own state construction. They borrow from private bankers, from criminals, and we pay back massive interest every single time one of these politicians signs a deal on another bike shed. The public then gets trapped in suspended morality, paying usury repayments, debt with interest, to private bankers because their government decided that we all needed a new bike shed. On paper, this looks successful. The administrator calls the result public investment. The company records revenue. The bank records a new asset, and the taxpayer receives a bill. The Fabians told everybody what everybody already felt at the time, that private owners collecting wealth from rent off land, infrastructure and industry were bad, and that we needed to transfer control of those assets into public bodies. And everyone thought, yes, that sounds ideal, and it still does. The problem is the assets were never transferred into any real kind of public body. Like under Brehon law, you would have had houses in a fine. It was just a structure that existed. Nobody owned it. Nobody managed it. You just got a house off the council when you needed one and gave it back when you died. Under this system, which is Fabianism, glorified empire, literally glorifying it, a small group control the asset and decide how the income is used and administered. So you are still paying rent. They did not agree with abolishing private property. They just agreed with, we'll manage it. We'll make sure that all of that profit gets well spent. And how has that gone? They created a new ruling role. So a new class of people who don't know what else to do with their lives. Only make things existentially worse for the rest of us and call it good management. There is still an owner holding a title, but now we have a technocrat that holds the expertise and we're supposed to listen. The public still holds all of the risk. It's LSE that turned that role of a technocrat into a profession and started to train people to measure, classify, price, regulate and administer society. Their authority came from their credential and their institutional position at places like LSE. The state collects the money, consultants design the service, contractors deliver it, asset managers own the contractors, banks finance the transaction, and think tanks are there to name this arrangement efficient. So, where public administration and private capital now meet is inside procurement. These are two systems that are supposed to be enemies, completely opposed. Public administration, private capital. It is inside the €3 million bike shed where these two systems stop pretending to be enemies. The billionaire gets the yacht, the technocrat gets the programme, the contractor gets the money, the public gets contempt. The Fabians remarketed domination as liberation. They told the public that expert control would free people from exploitation. They then gave educated administrators the power to decide who deserves support, who has to work, who can reproduce, who should be segregated, which families fit where, which populations are more efficient, which populations are better for certain kinds of work, which lives are represented as a burden to this state apparatus, and which countries are ready to govern themselves. Their reward was authority. The billionaire wants the money. He wants the lavish lifestyle. He wants the yacht. The Fabian gained the power to design other people's lives. They don't actually care about the pocket money. The British Empire would just say, we rule you because Britain conquered you. The Fabian administrator says, we manage you because we understand what's best for you. It's just a weird coincidence that always happens to be what's best for the empire. That second statement is much harder to fight. It arrives carrying research, statistics, professional credentials, and the language of care. It is Darvo systemically. The person experiencing the coercion as coercion gets told that the coercion exists so that they can be free. And poverty becomes evidence of your personal deficiency. Disability becomes an administrative burden. To resist this system is seen as irrational, and to refuse is seen as a failure to understand the science. The victim of the exploitation becomes the problem that the technocrat is tasked to solve. But they wouldn't be a victim if you would stop harming them. So the way to solve it is get your fucking foot off me neck. This is a system that can hurt people without requiring the operators of that harm to even admit to themselves they are hurting anyone. A committee classifies somebody. A department removes their choice. A doctor supplies the diagnosis. An economist supplies the justification. A university certifies the expert. A court confirms the correct process was followed. Every participant performs a respectable professional function. But the human that experiences the cumulative effect of this experiences torture. George Bernard Shaw gave this cruelty a clever voice and an Irish accent. His wit made domination sound intelligent. His socialism made control sound humane. His celebrity made eugenics, empire, and administrative coercion sound like the conclusions of a civilized man. That's why he was useful. Shaw believed people like him had the right to decide which other human beings should work, reproduce, receive support, or remain alive. And the Fabians taught Britain to experience administrative control as the only path to freedom. They placed coercion inside institutions associated with welfare, education, science, and public service. This gave the technocrats moral cover. It made resistance look selfish. The old empire took your freedom and called you conquered. The Fabians take your freedom and call that help.